Welcome to HOA Disasters, the channel where we expose the outrageous, the absurd, and the downright unbelievable stories from neighborhood hell. I'm Chicote, and if you've ever dealt with an HOA that went too far, you're in the right place. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because trust me, these stories only get crazier. Now let's get started. Claire Rivera had never been the type to stir controversy. She believed in order, in respect, in quiet strength, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. Her front porch was always neat, 2 potted mums flanking the steps, an old rocking chair repainted every spring, a flagpole with one rule: never flown in the rain. But the wreath, that was hers. Every year, Claire handcrafted one to hang on her front door. Never store-bought, never flashy, just something to mark the season. Sometimes it was autumn leaves, other times sunflowers and gingham for summer. But this year it was personal. It was a circle of red, white, and blue roses. Nestled in the bottom right corner was a thin yellow ribbon, the kind soldiers' families tied around trees when they waited for them to come home. And in the center, on a simple wooden plank, it read, "Freedom lives here." Claire didn't think twice about it. She hung it on a quiet Thursday morning, just after watering her plants. She stepped back, looked at it, and smiled to herself. Her late husband, Staff Sergeant Miguel Rivera, would have approved. He always said freedom didn't just mean voting or waving a flag. It meant being able to live your values without fear. By Friday morning, the envelope was on her porch. White. Want. Windowed. Sealed with the logo of the Meadowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. Claire slid it open with a kitchen knife and unfolded the single-page notice. Her eyes scanned the blocky typeface. Then, again, slower. And she is found in violation of Section 7B, Political Messaging on Exterior Decor. You are hereby instructed to remove the door wreath currently displayed. Failure to comply within 72 hours will result in a fine of $100, 0 cents per day. She had to sit down. Political messaging. She read the line again. Then again. It didn't compute. Since when was honoring the country or her husband a political act? The HOA had never complained before. Not when she hung a wreath made of old book pages that said, "Read more." Not when she tied green ribbons for Earth Day. But freedom lives here was apparently too much. Claire walked outside and stared at her door. The wreath swayed gently in the morning breeze, catching the first rays of sunlight. Nothing about it looked angry, or loud, or divisive. And yet someone, one of her neighbors, had called it in. Someone had looked at that yellow ribbon and that simple phrase and decided it was a threat. That's when something shifted inside her. This wasn't about a wreath, not really. It was about being told to sit down when you've done nothing wrong. It was about being told your values were too loud, even when all you did was hang them quietly on a door you pay the mortgage for. She looked back at the letter, now shaking slightly in her hands. And then she looked at the wreath. That yellow ribbon wasn't coming down, but something else was going up. Next chapter, Claire asks the board for an explanation. What happens next only makes it worse. Claire didn't scream, didn't rant, didn't even curse under her breath. She wrote a letter, typed, double-spaced, formal, civil. The kind of letter a civics teacher might write when someone forgets what civics even means. She addressed it to the Meadowbrook Estates HOA board, attached a photo of the wreath, referenced the clause from their own handbook, and ended with one simple question. What exactly is political about a yellow ribbon and the word freedom? 3 days passed. Then came the response. Short, cold, no greeting, no thank you, just Mrs. Riviera, we have received multiple complaints regarding the message displayed on your front door. While we acknowledge your intention may be patriotic, the board has determined that the display carries ideological connotations. Our neighborhood strives to remain neutral and welcoming to all residents. You are expected to comply with the prior directive. She read it twice. Then she laughed. Not a joyful laugh, the kind that slips out when you're stunned. Since when did freedom need a disclaimer? Her hands trembled, not from fear, but something older, sharper, that deep maternal instinct to protect something you know is right. So she took it public. Not to the news, not yet. Just her corner of Facebook. She uploaded a photo of the wreath, then a photo of the violation letter. Her caption was simple. I've lived here for 22 years. I've never missed a dues payment, never parked on the lawn, never caused a scene, but apparently this wreath is now too political. You tell me, has honoring your country become controversial? She clicked post. An hour passed, then 3, then 10 comments. 30, 80. By sunset, the post had over 300 shares. Her inbox lit up with messages from neighbors she hadn't spoken to in years. This is outrageous. I'm hanging my own flag tomorrow. We stand with you, Claire. But not everyone was supportive. One anonymous comment simply read, "You knew what you were doing." Another warned, "You're not helping the neighborhood's image." And from someone listed only as M. Why can't you just follow the rules like everyone else? Claire stared at that one a long time. Then she checked her porch. The wreath was still there. Still whole. Still soft in the breeze. But now, the air around it felt different. Charged. In the window across the street, a curtain fluttered. A shape moved away quickly. Watching. It wasn't just a rule anymore. It was a message. The HOA had drawn a line in the sand. Claire had stepped over it. But what they didn't understand, what they never understood, was that she taught generations of kids how to stand on principle. She knew how to fight with words, not fists. And she wasn't done yet. Claire ironed her blouse for the first time in months. The kind of blouse you wear when you're preparing to be underestimated. She didn't go in angry. She went in prepared. Tucked into her folder were 12 copies of the violation letter, one for each board member and a few extras in case the room suddenly grew more crowded. On top, her speech. 2 pages, single-spaced, not a word wasted. The Meadowbrook Estates HOA met in the rec center multipurpose room, which always smelled faintly of folding chairs and burnt coffee. Claire had spent years attending meetings like this back when her kids were young. Fundraisers, bake sales, budget votes. This one was different. The room was fuller than usual. Word had gotten around. Some people nodded as she entered. Others avoided her gaze. At the front sat Sharon Vexler, HOA president. Shoulders stiff and lips pursed, like she'd been sucking on lemons for 50 years. Claire took a seat near the aisle and waited. They got through landscaping reports, parking space assignments, a debate over pool hours, all of it dull enough to lull the room into a stupor. Then, next item, resident complaint door display violation. Mrs. Rivera, you've requested to speak. Claire stood. Her voice didn't shake. She handed the letters out one by one as she walked toward the podium. I'm not here to cause trouble, she began. I'm here because someone decided that a wreath, one made with red, white, and blue flowers, a yellow ribbon, and the words "freedom lives here" is somehow offensive. A few people nodded. Others shifted uncomfortably. She held up the original letter. This was taped to my door. It says I violated a rule about political messaging. I read that rule. I taught kids how to read rules. And I'm telling you right now, that wreath is not a campaign sign. It's not an endorsement. It's not a protest. It's a memory of my husband, of what we believed in. Sharon cleared her throat sharply. Mrs. Riviera, your 3 minutes are up. Claire didn't budge. She leaned forward, just slightly. Military ribbons now controversial, Sharon? Or is it freedom you're afraid of? A beat of silence. Then the room stirred. Sharon blinked rapidly, fumbling with her papers. The board has received several complaints. This isn't personal. We must remain ideologically neutral. Claire stepped back from the podium, her expression calm. That's funny. I didn't realize patriotism was a political party. Sharon motioned to the board. Let's proceed with the vote. It happened fast. Hands raised, mumbled a yes, a few nays, but not enough. The violation would stand. And from the back of the room, someone actually clapped. Just once. Soft, slow, sarcastic. A little cluster of Sharon's loyalists nodded to each other. One even smirked at Claire like it was over. But it wasn't. Because as she gathered her papers, she noticed something. A pause. A shift. Darius Mitchell, board member, rarely speaks, always votes last, was staring at her. Not glaring, not nodding, just watching. Like he knew the line had been crossed. Like he wasn't ready to say it yet, but he'd seen enough. Claire met his gaze for a second. No words exchanged. But something held. And something told her this fight was just beginning. The first fine showed up quietly. Like a warning shot wrapped in bureaucracy. $100, 0 cents. Claire unfolded the letter slowly, like maybe this time it would say something different. But it didn't. Non-compliance continues. Fine assessed at $100, 0 cents. No greeting, no explanation, just a number. A punishment for not obeying. She pinned it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like an apple, one of the hundreds gifted to her by students over the years. The next letter came 2 days later. Another $100, 0 cents. The third arrived with a red final notice stamped across the top. That one didn't just mention fines. It mentioned liens. If the current violation balance exceeds $1,000, 0 cents, the board reserves the right to pursue legal action, including, but not limited to, a lien on the property. Claire stood in her kitchen rereading that line, her fingers tightening around the paper. She'd lived in this house for over 2 decades. She and Miguel had saved for it, repaired it, raised their children inside these walls. Now some paper pusher wanted to threaten it over a wreath. That night, her son came over. Daniel, late 30s, always the voice of reason. He read the notices, quietly setting each one down like they might explode. Mom, I know you're proud, and I get it, but this is getting serious. They're threatening your house now. Claire didn't respond. She poured him tea, sat across from him. Just take it down, he said finally. Just for now. We'll fight it, but do it on their terms. You don't need this stress. She looked at him. Her son, the one she used to walk to school every morning with a lunchbox and a hug, and a lesson about doing the right thing. I taught kids for 35 years, she said quietly. I taught them about standing up, about rights, about how freedom isn't something you hand over just because someone sends you a letter. Daniel didn't speak. She pointed to the wreath still glowing faintly in the porch light. That's my line, Danny, and I'm not stepping back from it. The silence between them stretched, but it wasn't cold. He nodded, slowly. Okay, then we fight. But outside, something else was shifting. The neighborhood was beginning to notice. Some houses now had flags on their porches. A few had yellow ribbons tied to mailboxes. Small signals, quiet support. But others stayed dark. Still watching. The HOA hadn't backed off. They'd escalated. Claire opened her mail the next morning to find a 4th notice. Same wording, same threat. But this time, scribbled in pen at the bottom, were 5 words. This isn't over. Take heed. No signature. Just a warning. It wasn't just fines now. It was pressure, isolation, fear. But Claire didn't take the wreath down. She watered her plants, swept her porch, tightened the ribbon so it wouldn't blow off in the wind. She wasn't going anywhere. and neither was the wreath. Claire sat on the edge of her bed, the fourth violation notice clutched in one hand, her other resting lightly on her phone. The edges of the paper were soft from overhandling. Her eyes had memorized every line. But her mind was elsewhere now. Not on fines, not on liens. An opportunity. If they wanted to call her wreath political, fine. She'd show them what politics actually looked like. It started with a name. Councilwoman Janine Lockett. Claire had tutored her in high school, back when Janine still wore oversized sweatshirts and worried about the SATs. She'd gone on to major in political science, then ran for city council on a platform of accessibility and civic transparency. They hadn't spoken in years. But Claire had taught hundreds of kids, and some names you never forget. She dialed. The phone rang. Once. Twice. Then, Councilwoman Lockett's office. Claire took a breath. This is Claire Rivera. I used to tutor Janine. Councilwoman Lockett, back at Edison High. I was hoping to speak with her if she's available. It's personal. There was a pause. Then a click. 5 minutes later, her voice came through, warm but curious. Mrs. Rivera? Wow, I haven't heard that name in forever. You're the reason I passed the AP exam. Claire smiled, tension loosening. I always knew you'd end up doing something important. That's why I'm calling. She explained it all. Quickly, clearly, methodically. The wreath, the fines, the accusation that a tribute to her husband was too political for the HOA's tastes. And then she said the thing she knew would get Janine's attention. I don't want to argue with them anymore. I want to show them what standing for something actually looks like. I want to make this public. Silence. Then, you're thinking media. I'm thinking a dedication. For a bigger wreath. One they can't ignore. One I'll hang right on my property, right where it belongs. And I want someone standing beside me when I do. Janine paused. You want the mayor? Claire didn't flinch. I think he might want this too. Free expression, unity, local pride. It's the kind of story people remember. And the kind he might want to be part of. Another pause. Then Janine's tone shifted, more focused now. Let me ask him. Claire hung up slowly, heart still steady, but the air around her felt different, charged. She walked out to the porch. The wreath fluttered gently in the breeze, still bright, still quiet. But something had changed. She wasn't just defending it now. She was planning something bigger, something the HOA couldn't fine or threaten. Because this time, the cameras were going to be on her. And for the first time since the whole thing began, Claire allowed herself to smile. The phone rang at 8:42. Claire was already dressed. She'd been watching the wreath through her front window, like it might suddenly vanish or be hauled away by invisible hands. She picked up on the second ring. Mill? It's Janine. Claire straightened, already sensing something in the councilwoman's voice, an urgency threaded with excitement. I spoke to him, Janine said. He's interested. Claire blinked. The mayor? Mayor Donnelly, Janine confirmed. He saw the pictures, read the HOA letter. He said, and I quote, "Is this woman free next weekend?" Claire sat down slowly. Pete wants to make a statement?
Janine laughed softly. He wants to cut a ribbon. He wants photos. He wants to be the guy standing next to the woman who didn't back down. A pause. And frankly, so do I. Claire's voice caught just for a moment. I was never trying to make noise. You did, Janine said. They did. You're just not letting them drown you out.
They set the date for the following Saturday. Claire's front yard, 11 o'clock. The mayor would give a short speech on civic pride and freedom of expression. A podium would be arranged. The local press, TV, and newspaper were confirmed. Janine had another surprise. The East Jefferson High School band offered to perform. One of the kids saw your story online, said it reminded him of his gran. Claire smiled. That afternoon, she called a local craftswoman who specialized in event displays. They talked materials, delivery timelines, stability, and color. Claire's only creative direction was this. It needs to be massive, And it needs to say, liberty is not a violation. The woman paused. That's bold. I'm done being small, Claire replied. By Wednesday, the HOA sent another letter. This one was thinner. One line only. Your noncompliance will be documented and escalated. Claire folded it and tucked it into the growing pile on her kitchen counter. It didn't even sting anymore. That night, she sat down at her dining room table with a pen and stack of blank cards. Handwritten invitations. Neighbors. Local veterans. A few former students she still kept in touch with. She signed each one with the same 3 words. I hope to see you. By Friday, the wreath was delivered.
It came in 2 massive boxes, one for the frame, one for the lettering and fabric. Claire stood in her driveway as the delivery man hauled it out, blinking at the sheer size of it.
It was absurd. It was beautiful. It was loud, in all the right ways. The words, liberty is not a violation, were bold against the blue satin ribbon that looped around the edges. Yellow strands hung in tribute. She could already picture it on the porch. Already picture the mayor with scissors in hand. Already hear the band warming up. But most of all, she could feel it. What was coming. The shift. The unraveling. Because when the cameras arrived, the HOA wouldn't be able to hide behind silence anymore. The email hit inboxes just after midnight. Subject line, urgent notice regarding neighborhood activity. It was long, poorly formatted, and clearly written in a panic. Sharon Vexler's name sat at the bottom, like a wax seal of disapproval. Residents, it has come to the attention of the board that a member of our community intends to host a politically charged gathering this Saturday on HOA-governed property. The board does not condone public demonstrations that risk disturbing the peace or dividing the neighborhood. All residents are advised this event is unauthorized, disruptive, and in violation of Meadowbrook Code. Claire read it over coffee the next morning, barely suppressing a grin. They were scared. They should be. Because the mayor's name was already on the press release. The band had confirmed. A podium was scheduled for delivery in 2 hours. And a new wreath? It was already hung. 6 feet wide. Impossible to miss. Still, Claire waited for it. What she knew was coming next. It arrived around 10:30 a.m., hand-delivered in an envelope marked urgent. Another violation notice? No, something new. A cease and desist letter. 5 pages long. Legal boilerplate dressed up in passive aggression. This correspondence serves as formal notice that any public event, gathering, or ceremony conducted within Meadowbrook Estates must be submitted to the HOA board for prior review and written approval. Failure to comply will constitute grounds for enforcement action, including, but not limited to, monetary penalties, legal injunctions, and formal community reprimand. Claire read the last line twice. Formal community reprimand? What did that even mean? A scarlet letter? A town crier? She walked inside, scanned the document with her phone, and opened her email. To Rachel Mendez. Subject. This just landed on my doorstep. Rachel was a local news anchor. Level-headed, smart. Claire had met her once at a town hall years ago and followed her ever since. She attached the letter and wrote just 3 lines. Hi, Rachel. Looks like the HOA doesn't want the mayor to speak on my lawn about free speech. Thought you might find this interesting. She clicked send. 10 minutes later, Rachel replied, Ooh, Claire, this just got better. Sending a crew for pre-roll Friday. Mind if I stop by too? Claire replied with the time and her address. Then she stood on her porch, looking out over the freshly cut grass where a ribbon would soon be stretched and cut. Her neighbors were starting to poke their heads out more. A few waved. A few didn't. She didn't care. Let Sharon send her lettuce. Let her flail. The HOA could hide behind rules all it wanted, but this wasn't a stunt. It was a message, and the cameras were already rolling. The news van pulled onto Claire's street, at 8:07 a.m. Friday morning, 24 hours before the dedication. The logo on the side read WJTN Local 9 with the familiar red swirl and tagline, "Your voice, your news." Claire stepped onto her porch just as two crew members were unloading a camera and mic kit. The reporter, a young woman with a calm confidence and a no-nonsense ponytail, approached with a warm smile. "You must be Mrs. Rivera." Claire nodded. "You're early." The woman grinned. "So were you." They filmed. In front of the door, the original wreath. "Freedom lives here," still hung inside a shadow box Claire had mounted next to the new one. A sort of before and after display. The past and the protest. The camera panned gently over both wreaths. "Phew. Can you tell us why this all started?" Claire spoke clearly, her voice steady, not performative. "It started with a yellow ribbon and a word I thought we all agreed on. Freedom. But apparently that was too much." She didn't need to rehearse. She just told the truth. Some people in charge here forgot who this community really belongs to. So, I'm reminding them. They were 5 minutes into filming when the shrill crunch of heels on pavement broke the moment. Sharon Wexler, HOA president, clipboard in hand like it was a badge of office. Her mouth was already moving before she even reached them. "You can't film here. This is private property. I need you to leave." The cameraman barely looked up. The reporter didn't flinch. "We're on the sidewalk, ma'am. Well within our legal right to record a news segment." Sharon's face twitched. "But this is HOA land. It's a public access path adjacent to a private home. Legally, we're fine," the reporter said coolly. Then added, "Unless you'd like to escalate this publicly on camera." Claire stood silently, watching Sharon realize she'd walked into a trap with her own 2 feet. Sharon backed off, muttering something about protocol and escalations, and retreated toward her golf cart, which sat awkwardly parked at the end of the cul-de-sac like a discarded thread. But the damage was done. Several neighbors had come out during the exchange. Some just watched, others whispered. One man down the street clapped, just once, and went back inside. A woman in yoga pants took a video on her phone, probably already uploading it to the neighborhood group chat. The divide was opening. You could feel it in the air, something unspoken becoming visible. Some people were tired of the rules. Others were scared of what defying them might mean. But everyone was watching now. Sharon's moment on the sidewalk would make it into the segment. A 2-second clip, eyes wide, jaw clenched, being reminded she had no authority outside the bounds of her clipboard. Claire didn't gloat. She didn't need to. She just stood next to her wreath and let the camera roll. Because now the whole city would see what was happening. Not just a wrath. Not just a rule. A woman. A fight. A choice. By 10:15 IDEM, Clare's street looked like the 4th of July had decided to hold a press conference. Cars lined both sides of the cul-de-sac. Lawn chairs popped up along curbs. Neighbors, who'd barely nodded at each other for years, now sat side by side, squinting toward Claire's porch like it was a stage. A wreath, 6 feet wide, red-white mule and wrapped in silk yellow ribbons, was still hidden beneath a cream-colored cloth, tied at the top, anchored at the sides. Waiting. The podium sat just to the right of the front steps. A microphone cable snaked back toward a small portable speaker setup. Behind the hedges, the East Jefferson High School band warmed up, horns sputtering, drums thumping, a brief chorus of Stars and Stripes Forever, cutting through the air like a warning shot. At 10:40, the black SUV arrived. Out stepped Mayor Richard Donley. Gray suit, no tie, rolled up sleeves like he wanted to look like a man of the people. Claire met him at the curb. They shook hands. Cameras flashed. "I've never seen a front yard so ready for a revolution," he whispered with a smirk. Claire smiled. "It's overdue." They made their way to the podium, passing a cluster of news crews and folding chairs. But not everyone came to clap. Near the end of the block, a black sedan sat idling. 2 men stepped out wearing khakis, polos, and earpieces. One held a camcorder. The other scanned the crowd like he was waiting for a riot that hadn't RSVP'd. was on the side of their car, printed in sharp lettering, Pine Gate Security Solutions. Sharon's doing. She didn't come herself, but her signature was all over this, sending hired eyes to document the ceremony, likely hoping to catch some code violation she could weaponize later. Claire didn't flinch. She turned toward the crowd. The mayor stepped to the podium. A hush settled, broken only by the chirp of a walkie-talkie from the security car. Mayor Donnelly adjusted the mic. I've attended a lot of events in this town. Ribbon cuttings for new shopping centers, groundbreakings for parking garages. But this... He looked toward Claire. This is the first time I've been asked to cut a ribbon for the First Amendment. Laughter rippled. A few cheers. But make no mistake, what we're doing here matters. Because when a citizen decorates her own front door in honor of her husband's service and the values she holds dear, and gets threatened with fines, liens, and silence... He paused. That's not order. That's overreach. He turned to Claire and nodded. No rulebook should silence a citizen's pride. Applause exploded. Claire stepped forward with a pair of oversized gold-handled scissors, borrowed from the high school theater department, and offered them to the mayor. He waved her off gently. This is your cut. Claire took the scissors, turned to face the cloth-draped wreath, and sliced the ribbon clean through. The fabric dropped. Gasps, then claps. Then a standing ovation. Liberty is not a violation. Bold, centered, undeniable. People surged forward with phones. The band burst into a booming rendition of America the Beautiful. And down the street, the Pine Gate security guys filmed in silence, their camera tilted just slightly downward. Because what they were capturing wasn't chaos. It was order restored, but not the kind Sharon ever intended. The ceremony was over. The band had packed up. The mayor was shaking hands by his car. But the crowd? They stayed. Something about the moment felt bigger than a speech. Claire stood near the wreath, answering questions, posing for selfies, hugging people she hadn't seen since Miguel's funeral. And that's when it happened. A piercing screech broke through the calm, high and desperate, like someone trying to put a fire out with gasoline. Across the street, Jerome Wexler stood in a pastel blazer and matching visor, clutching a beige megaphone like it was a weapon forged in a Hobby Lobby. This is an unauthorized gathering, she blared. Heads turned. A few chuckled. Claire looked over and met her eyes. Sharon's face was red, one hand trembling slightly on the handle of the megaphone. The HOA board does not approve of this event. Participants may be subject to code enforcement. But no one moved, because right then, the high school band struck up one final song. And the cheers, real, raw, rising from the crowd like a wave, drowned Sharon out completely. Her mouth kept moving, but her voice was swallowed whole. Cameras swiveled to catch the standoff. Some zoomed in on her face. Others captured the ridiculous sight of a woman screaming into silence, while a neighborhood stood proudly in front of a 6-foot wreath. The next morning, Sharon filed an emergency motion with the HOA board. She didn't waste time with subtlety. Violation. Unauthorized use of HOA-governed space. Violation. Public gathering without pre-approval. Violation. Visual nuisance exceeding permitted signage dimensions. 3 counts, maximum fines. Immediate enforcement recommended. She even tried to call in the county zoning office, left 3 voicemails. One of them reportedly ended with, I don't care if she's a widow. Rules are rules. But the damage was done. That night, the clip of Sharon shouting into the megaphone hit Twitter. Posted by a local teen with the caption, "HOA president tries to cancel Wreath. Gets buried by brass band instead." 500,000 views in 12 hours. By morning, it was trending. Claire's photo, standing calmly beside her giant wreath, while a woman shrieked from across the street, went viral. Someone slapped a title on the image, The Wreath Warrior. It stuck. Claire didn't even have a Twitter account. She found out when a former student texted her, "You're literally a meme and a hero." By Sunday, national media reached out. Morning shows, cable news, opinion writers. One anchor called it a masterclass in patriotic defiance. Another dubbed it the suburban Rosa Parks of porch decor. Claire declined most interviews. She wasn't chasing fame. But she agreed to one, a local segment, just long enough to say this: I didn't do this to go viral. I did it because I got tired of being told I had to be small to keep the peace. I loved my husband. I love my country. And I'm not sorry for either. Back in Meadowbrook, Sharon's emails went unanswered. Board members started avoiding her. Some residents posted wreaths of their own. A few even added tiny banners that read, "Wreath Warrior lives here." Sharon had drawn the line, but now the whole world had crossed it. It started with a tweet from State Senator Elaine Travers, known for rarely wading into neighborhood issues, but this time she did. No OCA should have the power to silence patriotic expression on private property. The law is clear. The people are watching. Claire read it on her phone while sipping tea on her porch. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't tremble. But she felt something she hadn't in weeks. Momentum. Within hours, local news outlets picked it up. By the afternoon, it was quoted in the Post. And the next morning, a plain manila envelope arrived at the HOA's mailbox, stamped from the office of the city attorney. Inside, a cease and desist order. The language was direct, no wiggle room. Any continued action taken by the Meadowbrook Estates HOA targeting Claire Rivera under the cited violation codes will be interpreted as a willful infringement on constitutionally protected expression. You are hereby instructed to halt enforcement, remove accumulated fines, and cease public statements regarding the aforementioned displays or gatherings, pending legal review. Was the legal version of a slap across the face. Sharon reportedly called an emergency board meeting that evening. Only 3 members showed up. 2 left early. No votes were cast, no minutes recorded. The machine was breaking down. Meanwhile, Claire's mailbox filled with letters. Some from neighbors, some from strangers, and one from a non-profit based 2 towns over. Americans for Liberty at Home. They'd read about her, seen the footage, reviewed the HOA's bylaws. The letter was short and to the point. We believe your case could set precedent. If you're willing, we'd be honored to represent you, free of charge. Claire placed it on her kitchen table beside the senator's tweet and the city's order. The paper trail was stacking, but for once it was on her side. Later that night, she heard a knock on the door. Not aggressive, not timid, just respectful. She opened it to find Darius Mitchell, HOA board member, soft-spoken, the only one who hadn't raised his hand during the original vote. He looked tired, but resolute. I won't stay long, he said. I just wanted you to know you're not alone in this. Claire tilted her head. You still on the board? Technically, he said, but probably not for long. Sharon's imploding. Half the board's embarrassed. The rest are just scared they'll be next. He reached into his coat pocket and handed her a folded paper. Notes from the last meeting. Handwritten. Private. Here, he said. Proof they knew this was over the line before they ever sent you the first notice. Claire didn't say anything for a long moment. Then Darius leaned in, voice lower. You've got allies. We've had enough. She nodded. I know, and I'm not stopping. He smiled, small but real, then turned and left. She watched him walk back into the dark, past homes still lit with porch lights and yellow ribbons. The air had shifted again. The silence was over. And now, even from inside the board, the cracks were showing. It began with the clipboard. Then 2, then a line of folding tables under a pop-up tent outside the clubhouse. Petitions circulated faster than HOA letters ever could. One by one, neighbors signed, not just out of loyalty to Claire, but because something inside them had finally snapped. No one had moved here for war, but no one had signed up for tyranny either. Within 48 hours, the signatures were certified. Under HOA bylaws, a special vote could be triggered with 35% resident support. Claire's neighborhood submitted 58%. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday night. Claire didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her Wreath had already done all the talking. The clubhouse filled fast. Standing room only. Residents in lawn chairs. Elderly couples who hadn't attended a board meeting in a decade. Teens live streaming from the back wall. And in the front row, Sharon Vexler, seated alone, clipboard in her lap like a sinking raft. The atmosphere was electric. Not angry, just decisive. Darius stood at the podium, calm, straight-backed. No blazer, no smugness. Just a notepad and a tired but determined tone. This vote isn't about a wreath, he said. It's about a board that forgot who it serves. He listed the violations, the fines, the cease and desist, the national embarrassment, the silence when neighbors asked for answers. Then he stepped back. 2-3 names were read aloud. Sharon Vexler, Martin Gellies, Catherine Hope, each tied to votes, complaints, and a private security camera car that recorded children and grandparents like they were suspects. Ballots were handed out. Silence fell as people marked them. Sharon sat frozen, hands folded tightly in her lap, lips whispering something no one could hear. When the counting began, the room stayed quiet. But once the final tally was posted on the projector, the silence broke. Motion passed, 74% in favor. Sharon's name was stripped from the board. So were Martin's and Catherine's. Go! No applause, just a collective exhale. It wasn't celebration. It was relief. Darius stepped back to the mic. As acting president, I'm suspending all pending fines related to decorative violations. Effective immediately. All records tied to enforcement from the Rivera incident are voided. Claire stood in the back, arms crossed gently, watching it unfold. A neighbor turned to her. You did it. Claire shook her head. We did. Outside, as the crowd filed into the parking lot, someone had stuck a tiny yellow ribbon under the clubhouse door. No name, no statement, just the ribbon. Inside, Sharon gathered her clipboard and walked out the side exit, unnoticed. And Darius? He stayed. He shook hands. He answered questions. He took down suggestions for actual improvements. Potholes, playground updates, maybe even a spring picnic. For once, the board was listening. And for once, Claire didn't feel like she had to yell to be heard. The wreath was still on her door. Still massive. Still proud. But the fight wasn't on her porch anymore. The power had shifted. The wreath stayed. Through fall winds, through early frost, through every drive-by glance from the few neighbors who still looked away, it never came down. But it no longer stood as protest. Now it was something else entirely. A reminder. A marker. A beginning. 2 weeks after the vote, Claire got a letter. Handwritten, not typed. From a civics teacher at East Jefferson High. My students watched the story unfold in real time. I'd be honored if you spoke to them about courage and how to keep calm when everything around you says give in. Claire said yes. She brought the original wreath with her, boxed in clear acrylic now, a symbol more than a decoration. She stood in front of 30 teenagers and told them how standing up doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes it looks like staying still when someone tells you to move. When she finished, no one clapped. Not right away. They just sat there, quiet, like they were thinking. And that was enough. Back in Meadowbrook, something had shifted for good. One Saturday morning, a small group of neighbors knocked on Claire's door. They held a flyer, Wreaths for Rights Community Craft Fundraiser. The idea was simple. Residents would gather, decorate wreaths, and sell them to raise funds for free speech awareness and legal aid for HOA victims. Claire didn't hesitate. She donated her porch, her time, and the first supplies. By the end of the week, The rec center was packed. Mothers with toddlers, veterans with steady hands, teens with glue guns, and protest slogans. Each wreath told a story. One read, "Speak soft, stand firm." Another, "Proud to be loud." And several, maybe more than several, simply said, "Wreath Warrior." Local papers covered the fundraiser, so did regional news. Donations poured in. Requests came from other neighborhoods, other states. Claire started compiling letters, ones from people who said they'd finally pushed back against their own HOAs, citing her story. It was no longer about her. It was bigger, a movement made of silk flowers and spine. And as the holidays rolled in, Claire did what she always did. She made a new wreath. Red, deep green, gold trim. But in the center, simple white lettering on hand-sanded pine. Never again silent. She stepped out onto her porch in a soft gray sweater, one hand gripping the new wreath by the frame. She removed the old one gently, carefully preserved now, and replaced it with this new chapter. Not angry, not loud, but clear, firm, final. Cameras weren't there, reporters weren't waiting. But a neighbor walking his dog stopped across the street, tipped his head, and gave her a quiet nod. Claire returned it, then stepped back inside. Because this wasn't a stunt. This wasn't defiance. This was home. And for the first time in a long while, it finally felt like hers again. Final line. They tried to take my door, so I opened it wider. If this story moved you, share it. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories, where justice, courage, and community collide. Hit that notification bell, so you never miss a moment where the little guy stands tall. We'll see you in the next one.